Support for Race Unwrapped comes from the Kentucky Center for African American Heritage. Their mission is to enhance the public's knowledge of the history, heritage, and cultural contribution of African Americans in Kentucky and the African diaspora. KCAAH is dedicated to providing a heritage experience through education, enrichment, and entertainment. Located at 1701 West Muhammad Ali Boulevard. Calendar of events and more at kcaah.org.
From Louisville Public Media.
I'm Michelle Tyrene Johnson. Welcome to Season 5 of Race Unwrapped. I can't believe we are in Season 5. This season is on art as protest. And protest is a big word, so by protest, I mean the obvious, but I also mean social justice. I mean the ability to use art to find a way to talk about the things that matter to you for people who want to make the world and the society that they live in a bigger and better place. We're kicking off this season with a conversation that I had with Stacey Abrams. Political juggernaut. I mean, she's run for office. She's been in office. She has started political organizations to get people voting. I mean, she has put Georgia on the map as a place that makes a difference in terms of how elections go. I mean, she's badass, and that's how we know her. But she's a writer, and I don't mean just nonfiction writing about politics, even though she does that too. She is a fiction writer. There's this real page turner that I read of hers called While Justice Sleeps. It's my kind of fiction because it's the kind of fiction where you're learning as well as enjoying a good story. Here's Stacey Abrams. Miss Abrams, welcome to Race Unwrapped.
Thank you for having me, and please call me Stacey.
Oh, thank you. It is such an honor to get to meet you. I am a fan in more ways than one. So I'm just going to jump right into it. I know you have limited amount of time because you are a very busy woman. So I got to ask you this question. How do you view your love and talent for fiction writing as an arm of fighting for democracy?
Democracy is a story. We are telling ourselves about the kind of country we want to be, the kind of people we want to be, the kind of justice we want to inhabit. And the best way for people to imagine it is to tell a good story. And so for me, the fiction writing that I do has always been about how do I take those component pieces of the lives we lead and the people we are and knit them together in a story that gives us a bit of education and knowledge, a bit of intrigue and romance. But most of all, how do we create a world that we want to keep visiting again and again? And that, to me, is where democracy is most expressive and most desired. It's when we want to keep coming back. We want to save it. We want to serve it. And so whether I'm writing romance or legal thrillers or even children's books, it's how do I tell the story of the world we want?
And, I just finished reading While Justice Sleeps. I was riveted, like absolutely riveted. And it was crazy how many things you weaved in. You weaved in law and politics and the intelligence communities and the Supreme Court and the dangers of biogenetics. And I used to practice law a bajillion years ago. And so I know how it's hard to stay on one track, let alone weave in 50 majillion tracks. What is it when people leave your thrillers that you want to leave them with?
I want them to feel smarter about the world they're in and not outmatched by it. All of the topics that you raise, biogenetics, law, politics, all of those have distancing components to it. If you don't have a PhD in it, if you aren't steeped in it, if it's not what you do every day, we sometimes feel that we are not supposed to know much or that we should just accept what we do know. I'm nosy. I've been nosy for a very long time. And even as a child, my nosiness was well matched because my mother was a research librarian. So if she said, go look it up, there was really no question. You had to go look it up. And that expanded my curiosity, but it also made me feel more equipped to deal with things I wasn't supposed to understand. And so I like to weave together topics that seem disparate, seem complicated, and that have power in our lives in ways that we aren't always invited to understand. And then I like to wrap them in a murder, or of a romance, or a little bit of both,
Or both.
and then give the reader a chance to leave the story not feeling like they're an expert, but feeling like they can hold their own. And hopefully that's what you felt when you were finishing up While Justice Sleeps.
I was, and I loved how you have all these different ways you come at it. Like, I was all about the romance. I'm sorry, I'm not giving anything away for someone who hasn't read it yet. Jared and Avery, but trying to the ticking clock of a mystery where you're trying to keep someone from dying and trying to keep a society from being harmed, and you just did this really great job of weaving all those in. And it reminds me of, when I've seen you talk about politics over the years and how you've constantly had to try to weave in all these different factors to get people to understand why an election wasn't important, why voting was important. Um, I just read that this is a series, so I get to visit Avery again.
Yeah.
So what is it that you think a series can do when you're writing about these different issues?
When my parents became ministers, they used a term. They said, you meet people where they are, not where you want them to be. And for them, that was, you aren't there for the converted. You're there to help the converted. But it's the people who need you. And you can't wait for them to solve their own problems before they come to you. Part of your job in the pastorate is to go to where they are. As a writer, as someone who believes in democracy, I think I've got to go to where my readers are. And so I want to have something there for everyone who decides they want to meet me in that space. I get as close to where they are as possible. But if you want someone to open a book, you got to give them a reason. In each of the books, I try to tackle a core policy issue that I think is big and unwieldy and incredibly important. So when I wrote While Justice Sleeps, it was biogenetics. In Road Justice, I actually grapple with our electrical grid and the FISA court, which seem completely disparate, but I'm a fiction writer, so I got to bring them together.
That's right.
And then the most recent story, Coded Justice, looks at the intersection of AI, DEI, and veterans healthcare.
Ooh, I can't wait.
See? And in each of those, to your question, the mission of a series is one, to make you start to feel comfortable with these explorations. In Road Justice, I have a scene where the characters talk about how many acronyms there are. If you're going to write about government, if you're going to write about politics, acronyms come up.
Right.
But we can mock them. We can understand they're designed to be a shorthand, again, to distance us from what power they actually hold. Like when you hear DHS or Homeland Security or ICE, we create terms of art to create space between us and power. And so in a series, part of my mission is to unpack a lot of it so that by the time you're in Avery's orbit, you start to not question government, not question leadership, but to understand you have the right to interrogate why it holds the power it holds, why you should get to know more, why regulation isn't inherently evil. And I want you in the company of Avery and Jared and Noah and Ling and the other characters that come along in a series to start to feel like you're part of the gang. I want you to want to join them when they come back and for you to feel well equipped to go into their next foray.
As a reader, as an aside, I'm so glad to hear that Noah and Lynn and Jared come back because I love them all. So that's great to hear. And it's funny that you're talking about the initials in government because right now we're in a place where we're all hearing more initials than we've ever heard before. And I was thinking as I was, I was listening to the book as a form of reading your book. And I was just thinking how it's just interesting how you are able to detangle, so to speak, the lexicon of all these different areas of society, starting with government. And that's a real gift. And then it makes me wonder, do you find being a Black woman storyteller an activism on its own?
Absolutely. When While Justice Sleeps came out, one of the questions I got was about the characters and the race of the characters. I'm very clear about their race, but I also am not explicit about saying this Black person said, or this brown person said, or this white person said. I've embedded markers in the story, but I also wanted to express the universality of their experiences and the complexity of their lives. One decision I made was to make Avery, who is Black, I made her mother white. And her mother, as you know in the story, is grappling with a drug addiction. There is a conscious decision on my part to make that character white because there is a sympathy that we allow for addiction in whiteness that doesn't always translate to Blackness. And I know that from my family's personal experience. And so there is an activism in writing that lets me understand how readers experience both me as a writer and my characters as vehicles. And part of my job, especially as I think about democracy and storytelling, both in tandem and in tension, it's that I need both of them to work. And that means I've got to work at both of them. And part of activism, again, going back to my Karen's edict, you got to meet people where they are, but you also want to get them where you want them to be. And so one of the joys of being a writer, especially a Black woman writer who has written romantic suspense, who has written nonfiction that got banned briefly at the U.S. Naval Academy, a children's writer and a legal thriller writer, is that I have the blessing of being able to be in these spaces and in these genres, but I bring all of me with me. And that means when I tell my stories, I get to tell the stories of so many people who never, ever imagined that their voices would be heard in these pages.
It's so funny that you mentioned that about identifying the race of characters as a writer, because I did notice that, because I noticed that Black authors tend to not do that as much as white authors do. I literally threw a book across the room once when an author described these two cops. The author said one was Black and one was bald.
Yeah.
And that was,
But because as readers, especially for many, 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 many centuries, there's a standard to what was expected, and anything else was a deviation. And that also meant that the experiences were deviation. We're having this conversation the day after the Super Bowl. And the fact that Bad Bunny did an entire halftime show, he did his show almost exclusively and entirely in Spanish. There were a couple of English words from in that he spoke, and Lady Gaga got to sing her chorus in English, but otherwise it was Spanish. And for him and for an entire community, that was an affirmation of their right to be.
yeah.
And their right to be part of a universal understanding of what was a celebration of weddings and games and dancing and joy, but also the pain of labor, the toiling that happens in our communities. And so all of those things happen in a language that not everyone spoke, but they did not feel compelled to flatten themselves to fit into a narrative. And for me, writing is the same. Avery Keene is Black. I'm very proud of who she is, but I'm not going to juxtapose her and specialize her Blackness in contrast to someone else's race. She is who she is, and you're going to meet her as she is, but you're also going to meet her best friend, Ling Yen. And through context clues, you're going to know that she's Chinese. And you're going to learn about how race and class have intersected in Jared's life and his father. He was a Black Supreme Court justice, and that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is Black as well, but that's not a conversation that has to happen except in how she navigates a confrontation with her Latino counterpart. So for me, it's all of those things, but they should be considered part of, not exceptions to, how our stories are told.
Exactly. And that reminds me, so I read that when you first wrote this book, it was deemed too unrealistic. And so do you feel as if your books are prophecies, so to speak? Or or do you feel as if you're just writing what you write and life happens?
No, I like to think about things ahead of when they settle into our bones. Uh, when I wrote While Justice Sleeps, it was at the beginning of CRISPR, so the beginning of the Human Genome Project. It was before we were thinking about biogenetic weapons as something that could be real. I wrote it back in between 2008 and 2010, so that wasn't the thing. Now, by the time publishers decided that having an amoral president willing to engage in foreign, adventurism was possible and that people cared about the Supreme Court, at that moment, what I had written about 10 years ago actually seemed quite real and a bit prescient. The book on AI, I finished it before this latest wave of evolution. When I wrote about the electric grid in Rogue Justice, I also talked about cryptocurrency as a predicate for figuring out the story. And that was before we watched the leader of the free world decide to monetize the presidency and use cryptocurrency as part of his approach. But I say all that to say this. Part of my job as a former policymaker, but constant believer in democracy as an action means we got to know what democracy is supposed to help us do. And that means we got to get beyond the abstract concept of democracy to the stuff. And the stuff is, where do data centers go because AI is real? What kind of healthcare do we give our veterans, despite what we say we're going to do, when we defund the financial underpinnings of their healthcare? What are we going to say about an electric grid that is insufficient for the amount of power we need to draw? Those are policy conversations that I can couch in thrillers.
Yeah.
But it's not prophecy, it's predictability. If you look at the things we're worried about now, you need to go 2 steps back and look at what politicians are or are not agreeing to talk about. That's where I get a lot of my ideas. Like, what was the thing that didn't get a hearing? What was the question that got elided in the conversation? And why, did the hairs on the back of my neck stand up when I saw that note? And what can I do with it?
So what do you think is harder? Being an artist fighting for justice or being a justice fighter who creates art?
I have no idea because I have never seen myself in different strata. My mom, when I was growing up, said, she was like, we don't want to be a jack of all trade and a master of none. I heard she was saying, pick something and do it. I heard try everything. And so I described my way of living in this world. People say pick a lane. I picked the highway. And so I travel across the lanes. I pick the speed and the direction that I need to head in. But I've never been able to narrow who I am to fit this one thing. I am an artist who believes in justice. I am someone who believes in justice, who recognizes that art is how we bring justice to life for so many. And I'm a storyteller who thinks that we can envision a better America and a better world. And I want to be part of how we write that story.
I get it better than you think. I'm a former attorney who is a current playwright and radio journalist.
There you go.
So
Exactly.
I get it. I get it. And I get the whole pick the lane thing. So I know just
The
have a
bumper
couple.
sticker is hard to write, man.
I know, right? Right? I don't even bother anymore. That's also why I knit. Okay.
There you go.
That's when you use the word knit, it made sense to me. So I have what we call a popcorn question that we're going to be using. And we're going to come up with a playlist of protest songs because my season I'm going to be talking to all kinds of artists, like, writers, visual artists, dancers, craftivists, all those people. What's your top 1, 2, or 3 protest songs?
I love Tracy Chapman's second album, Crossroads, because it has some of the most extraordinary protest music that I've ever heard. So Prostrates is actually one of my favorite songs.
Okay.
There is a song that's not considered a protest song, but I would call it one. It's by Estelle. It was on the show Empire, but it's called Conqueror.
I was an Empire fan.
There you go.
Yeah.
And that song Conqueror, it's about you're going to fail, but your job is to still get up and fight and do what you can. And then going old school, you can never go wrong with anything that Nina Simone ever sang out loud.
Never. Never. Absolutely never, never, never. Well, this has been again, not just an honor, but a delight and a treat. And I already loved the first book in the series. Now you really are getting me excited about instantly downloading the next book in the series.
The next two.
The next two.
Get ahead of the curve.
Yes, yes. One last thing. Is there anything coming up that you want to, about either one of your organizations or your art?
Yes. So most of my time right now is really focused on the 10 Steps campaign. So people will go to 10stepscampaign.org. We are in the midst of an authoritarian regime, and we have to both recognize what it is and activate around how we stop it. And that's all in service of Set Free, which is we got to build the America we want. We've got to build the world we want. And so I encourage people to go to 10stepscampaign.org. They can always find me on my podcast, Assembly Required, or my Substack, Assembly Notes. But if you do those things, you'll find out about how we are in this together and how we can write the story of the next chapter of democracy.
Thank you so much for your time. This was great.
Thanks for having me.
Next up is a conversation about music as protest. And it is with Dr. Chelsea Green, who is a violinist, a vocalist, an educator, and she is the chair of the board of the Recording Academy, aka the Grammys, y'all. It's a wonderful conversation. See you next time on Race Unwrapped.
Race Unwrapped is produced by Michelle Tyrene Johnson for Louisville Public Media. Music by Allison Cross. Our executive producer is Laura Ellis. For more information, to contact us, or to support Race Unwrapped, visit raceunwrapped.org.
Support for Race Unwrapped comes from the Kentucky Center for African American Heritage. Their mission is to enhance the public's knowledge of the history, heritage, and cultural contribution of African Americans in Kentucky and the African diaspora. KCAAH is dedicated to providing a heritage experience through education, enrichment, and entertainment. Located at 1701 West Muhammad Ali Boulevard. Calendar of events and more at kcaah.org.
From Louisville Public Media.